Happy New Year. Happy 2025. We're finally back.
We are back.
We are back. So yeah, there was a 2-week break because, end of year and just decided
We needed a break.
we needed a break. So we're back with our first episode of the year.
Really?
Episode 44. A lot of things have happened over the past few weeks. CES, of course, the Consumer Electronics Show. It's one of the biggest shows of the year where everybody comes out with all their new fangled doodads and electronics. So we'll touch a little bit on that. Big topic this week, Zuck was on the Joe Rogan podcast for about 3 hours, and so we're going to talk about how he went a little bit thermonuclear on just about everything. And then also big tragedy happening right now in Los Angeles. We'll probably touch on a little bit of the fires just because that's the biggest thing on the news this week. So,
Well, Happy New Year. We were talking before we started recording of how our holidays went, and for the most part, they were pretty low key. We didn't have to deal with any of the crazy travel that was going on during the holiday, which I'm happy with because some people I know had some disastrous flights and hanging out in the airport situations.
Yep.
And yeah, the LA fires are going on right now. It's thinking about everyone in Los Angeles. We'll talk about it more after our true stories, but I know that's pretty devastating. Related to that, a year ago, we had the fires in Maui, which was also really devastating, taking down a pretty historic part of Hawaii. And this is another situation where we see dry conditions, high winds, creating these bigger wildfires, and it's not good for anyone. But yeah, so let's jump into our first story. CES is something we should talk about in general, maybe next week. There's a lot of things that were unveiled at CES, and we should talk about what our favorites are, just deconstruct CES 2025.
Yeah.
But for today, we're just going to focus on NVIDIA because NVIDIA is one of the hot darling companies we've been continuing to pay attention to, leading the foundation of the AI wave going on. And Jensen did a keynote for NVIDIA's unveiling. And just to summarize, the main things is he announced a new graphics card. So it's called GeForce RTX 50. That's going to power the next generation of GPU technology. And per his quote, Blackwell, the engine of AI has arrived for PC gamers, developers, and creatives. Using an Apple-esque type line, the most significant computer graphics innovation since we introduced programmable shading 25 years ago. So it'll be available in January for $2,000, which is the RTX 5090 model. And the RTX 5070 will be available in February, which is the lower end model for $549.
Yeah, so when you threw up the pricing, I think everybody's expecting those cards to come in like, $1,000, $2,000. But the cheapest one, the 5070, came in at like a little under $600, which is like, wow, that's amazing. 2x the performance is what he was claiming, or double the performance, which was exciting. I guess they called it Blackwell chips in them. But I've seen some relative comparisons of the current generations, which is the 440 series right now. And if you look at the specs are terrible. The 50s, it's like, all right, he's pulling something. You're actually getting less GPU than the previous one, even though he's claiming, oh yeah, you'll get twice X performance. So I think proof of the pudding is like how it turns out. I think the biggest thing is that people are a little curious about the DLSS for this new version where it's like inventing pixels, right? Is that really where the performance, like how is the performance actually going to play out with that tech? Because the hardware looks like it's underpowered relative to the previous generation. And also, is this going to make developers lazy? Because they're like, oh, the GPU will solve that, so we don't have to optimize as well as we did before. I thought that was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that was the GPU side of it, right?
Yeah. Maybe it'll make developers lazy. At the same time, like at the end of the day, the end result, right?
Yeah.
And so if it is solving solving the computational problems for the software, then awesome. If not, I think they'll have to, not be lazy.
Yeah. So I mean, graphics cards, it's always about the benchmarks, right? So we'll see when it's actually out there, and see what the actual comparison is. Yeah, because when I saw the specs side by side, I was like, oh, okay. Either that or the marketing team is trying to be creative in how they're talking about it, because the specs look like a big jump down. So it's like, how is it actually getting twice the performance?
Yeah.
But other than that, actually what I found the most interesting was when he was talking about, it looks like he was giving a hint of where the next big, I guess, bull run is going to happen. That's not AI, when he's talking about robotics. So I actually found that interesting. So
yeah, he went to that towards the end of the keynote, right? That was like his keynote of the keynote.
Yeah, there was this keynote of keynote. It's like 5,000 robots pop up behind him. Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting. So the chip dedicated for a new chip was it Thor?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, so Thor, the new basically robotic chip in a box, I think is how I would coin it. I thought that was interesting. And the way he talked about autonomous driving, that was the second one that I thought was super interesting, where you could basically build training data for autonomous vehicles. Do you remember that? It's like Cosmos, because of all the things that everybody's saying now is that basically there is no more data that AI can use to train. It's like we've gone through all the data. We've gone through all of human created data at this point. And so what do you do beyond that? And I thought this was interesting in that sense. Right. Is now you start to create scenarios, or the AI can create scenarios too, apparently.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought process. On one hand, I agree that there's so much data in the world of how humans respond or think about things that at this point, like everything is going to be incremental, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, through the times, as new things come into the world, like humans change.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, I agree. There's really not much data that's going to train the models effectively enough to make big updates or improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, we can do whatever you want now with AI and robotics because they know what to expect, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like, no, I'd like, there is a lot of data that's going to come in the next 100 years that will evolve the models.
It'll be an interesting thing outside of like even what Jensen talked about just for like vehicles. I think on the other side is Google is trying to tackle some of those problems in that. So they have these improved models, right? And so they would basically feed the data generated by these new models as additional training data. I think similar to what you were saying, right? So like they've optimized, and so they have cleaner data that can then be fed back into like the model. But anyways, so yeah, I thought Jensen, its talk was, at least those to me were actually the most interesting things, is the autonomous and then the robotics.
He also announced their first desktop gaming PC.
Was it gaming? I felt like it was more like a development box.
I mean, yeah, maybe that's a Freudian slip because I associate NVIDIA with gaming stuff.
Yes.
But first desktop PC.
Yeah, I was actually disappointed in that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, as an investor, I was more hopeful. I think the rumors that I was reading is that they were going to introduce a CPU, a desktop CPU, as in like competing with Intel or AMD on that front, which I thought that would have been super interesting. But yeah, it ended up being just an all-in-one box for developers that has all of NVIDIA's tools and services built into it. Like, boring.
Well, remember a few episodes ago when we were talking about NVIDIA and how they keep growing, and it's like expanding into more hardware.
Yeah.
Consumer hardware. Like, I know this isn't necessarily that, but it's a play I think that they could do.
Yeah, I mean, that's the least interesting thing to me, because I
like
wanted it to be a desktop.
Yeah. If NVIDIA were to own AI powered hardware, like own that segment for the home, for example,
Mhm.
that'd be pretty cool. We're having problems with our Echo. I bought a new Echo Show for Christmas
Uh-huh.
because we had the original Echo Show, the first generation, and it was starting
Yeah.
to quote unquote die, like super laggy.
Yeah.
We would speak at commands and it wouldn't do it. And I was like,
Yeah.
I think it's just dying.
Yeah.
So I got the new one,
Mhm.
Echo Show 8, or maybe
Mhm.
there's the new one, but a new one. It's still laggy. And it's just like, I don't know. So I did this. The reason I'm telling the story is because it's again, still not doing great. And I searched and I was like, who else makes these things?
Yeah.
And no one does. It's only Amazon and Google.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, why has no one else made these smart
Mhm.
home touchscreen,
Yeah.
AI speaker
Yeah.
solution?
Well, Apple might launch one soon.
Yeah.
I've seen rumors. Their home hub, something, which makes sense. I mean, they've had HomeKit forever, but
But it's going to be 5 times the price.
that's right. You're gonna pay
I'm
for
going to
the
buy that.
Apple thing.
I
Yeah.
know Meta tried the whole thing before and that kind of
Failed.
didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So NVIDIA, get into the AI powered consumer home business, please. Just kidding.
Maybe we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. Nah, they're hyper focused on development.
Yeah.
Like developer tools.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was good to talk about NVIDIA. Let's talk about more CES next week and
Yeah.
give our hot ones and our cold ones, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, there are a couple of things.
I think the reason why you're talking about the data as well is because the whole quantum computing drop.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So there was an interview, Jensen did an interview, and anybody, not financial advice, but over the past, few weeks or something, I know we mentioned a couple of episodes ago where Google talked about their new Willow um, quantum computing project, and how they made breakthroughs in there, and that basically sent every single any company related to quantum computing like skyrocketing
Bye.
like 1,000%, like Ionic, Qubits, D-Wave. So all those names I'm sure everybody's familiar with by now. But yeah, he basically in an interview said, yeah, quantum he thinks is still a ways out. And when he said a ways, like 20 years out, which basically torpedoes the entire quantum market, which is hilarious. I was like, why is my QVTS like down 100%? It's so crazy. And I was like, oh, okay, this is why. Because literally down like, these things take like 50% and stuff. So yeah, so Jensen basically put the brakes on the entire quantum market as he doesn't think there will be anything viable or commercially viable for the next 20 years as a sweet spot. Specifically around the way he said it too, is like quantum computing it's really for small data sets and not built for big data, which if you think about AI, it's all about big data, which I thought was interesting. And of course, you had everybody else on the flip side coming think, no, he's wrong, right? But then it's like, all right, who are you going to believe, right? I think Jensen pulls a lot of weight at this point. Oh,
Well, I had
anyways.
heard after Google talked about those announcements that, yeah, it was a bit blowing smoke out of ears and stuff, and kind of, it's like that. It was just like Google's way to just get a pop and relevancy.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, I guess we'll find out in the next 10 years whether true or not. Maybe this is your buying opportunity for the next, if you want to retire, or for those of you who are not old. I think really what it is people are just looking for the next NVIDIA, right?
Yeah.
With quantum computing is why. But anyways, I sold out most of my position beforehand, so I'm not. I had one token share is why I kind of mentioned when.
I never put any money into quantum computing. It's like too early. Buzzword.
It was an incredible run. Incredible run.
All right. Moving on to the next story. Zuck. We're going to talk about Zuck.
Zuckerberg. He's just making waves across the board.
What
Bro,
have Zuck been
bro,
doing, Tony?
yeah, bro is going like, I'm burning bridges all over the place. But yeah, so if anybody is not aware or doesn't follow anything on X or just in general, so yeah, Zuck was on the Joe Rogan podcast. It was a 3 hour, about 3 hours, I think. I haven't actually watched the entire thing just because it's so long, but yeah, Zuck making big waves across the board. Oh, I guess I should mention what some of these big waves are.
Yeah.
So
You want to sum it up?
yeah, so I think one of the biggest ones that's is kind of making waves is he's gotten rid of basically their fact checking system is what he wants to do. And so making Meta platforms more open in the sense of they are not going to do a lot of checking and they're going to be introducing something similar to X, which is community notes and relying on the people to fact check versus Meta being the arbiter of yes, this is true or not. And so I think that is one of the ones that's making the biggest waves.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you know, I this is all like media positioning as well, but the way I translate it is Zuck is selling out.
Yes.
And it
Yep.
can be taken that way. I mean, like before Trump, he had some, stances that aligned with the Biden administration.
Mhm.
Apparently, all these things came about after he went to a meeting with Trump at Mar-a-Lago.
Mhm.
And he came out of it with all these things that now, were part of that discussion and meeting,
Yeah.
and that he is positioning himself to align with the Trump administration, which from a business perspective is always a good move because, you want to have the support of the presidential administration. I mean, when Trump got elected, all of these CEOs of the big tech companies made donations, right, to the inauguration, whereas beforehand, arguably, like some of them were more critical of like the MAGA initiative. Apparently, like I heard a story where it was like justified or explained like the MAGA movement
Mhm.
in a more positive light. And so I think like it makes sense. Oh, and the other one, Dana White elected to Meta's board. Did you hear about that one?
No. Is that the
Dana White,
wrestler?
the owner of the UFC.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw
Who
that.
is, the famous picture, the famous meme from election night was Trump, Elon Musk, and Dana White sitting at a table together. And it
Yeah.
was like CEO, CMO, CTO. So yeah, Dana White is on Meta's board now.
Yeah.
We know Zuck has always been fond and been into MMA and UFC. So
Yeah.
that is one, not a surprise, but also, interesting.
Yeah.
And then my other thought is like, wow, I think like we're set here for the next few years to really see this like Meta aligning more towards MAGA,
Mhm.
Zuck in cahoots with Elon, with Trump.
Yeah.
All good things for Meta, all good things for Elon.
Yeah.
So I'd say politically, it's a good move
Yeah.
for Zuck. It's just one of those eye roll things for me where, position of power, they're going to do the political swing. Kudos to you. I'm glad I bought Meta at 560.
Yeah. So, I mean, I thought it was interesting because I was like, where is all this coming from, right? And so I don't know if like there was this one podcast we've talked about a lot of his podcasts that he's had over the course of the past year, and I think one of them he was just like he's at a point in his life where he just doesn't really care what people say about it, and so I'm almost curious if this also is part of that. Is like he's just like, I'm going to say what I really think at this point because it seems like that's the vibe. I think the vibe is what's been mentioned a lot of the current of this upcoming presidency, and so he's just like saying whatever he wants. And so what I mean by that is, all right, so we're going to table that, which is this is the more public, I think what most people kind of get. And there's the actual like tech side. He did a couple of things on the actual tech side that are a big deal in tech circles. And so like he's basically gotten rid of DEI initiatives. I think the biggest one I saw trending was people like, what? Why is this a thing of he's asked or said for the immediate removal of all feminine products from male bathrooms. And people are like, what? What is that? That doesn't make sense. And people in tech won't get this, right? It's because, and this was actually a surprise when I joined Google and I went into the bathroom and then you see all these feminine products in the male bathroom. It's like, did I come into the wrong bathroom? It's a real thing. Like as somebody,
Oh yeah, I've seen it. I think that WeWork.
and it's like people don't get it. Well, again, it's part of
DEI.
DEI, right? Is mixed use bathroom, and there's also unisex bathrooms, right? So I think people also forget that in tech you have male, female, and there's just been this move also to have just basically unisex bathrooms where there isn't a distinguished male or female. But anyways, so in tech circles, that was a big move because it kind of like goes against the entire whatever for the past many, many years. I won't even say just from the Biden administration, but even before Biden, right? And so that's kind of making waves. I hear a lot of people are upset within Meta itself because he's seemingly going scorched earth and pulling back on all the progress that has been made over the many years, which I thought was interesting.
Well, it's also just weird to me. I mean, why that, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that is more of a personal preference versus anything that's actually affecting.
Yeah. It's a weird thing to hang his hat on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just like, traditionally, like traditionally, like Republicans being, anti-gay or anti-whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's it's not even a political stance, it's their personal stance, right? But it alienates, a lot of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird one.
So I just wonder like how the dominoes will topple, right? Because like it's a follow like Meta is not the first company to get rid of DEI. I feel like it was Amazon. Is that right? Do you remember?
I don't
But
remember.
I feel like once like Meta has done it, and so you kind of anticipate other big tech companies will follow. I'll be curious if Google follows the kind of like same stance. I think Google has actually pared down some of its DI initiatives like early on last year. I wonder if they go full Zuck.
Yeah.
I guess that'll be the term I'm going to say now. If the company's going to go full Zuck and see what they do, because it's been pretty ingrained in Google, even in there'd be these like yearly trainings that you'd have to take on DEI to make sure you understood, which to be honest, like some of it is really weird. I don't know if I can talk about it. I probably can't talk about it here, but just some stuff. Even I was like, okay, this is strange. All right, maybe yeah. I won't.
I never had to do any of that, so
I'll probably offend somebody with one of the examples, but because I'm like, that example doesn't make sense. I'll do it. Why not? Okay. Well,
I've heard.
We'll go full.
I think the meta point, no pun intended.
Yeah.
The meta point is because we're getting a little bit off track. It's like Zuck is just he's shifting a lot of his ways and using Meta as that ground to do so.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. He's come out basically now that Trump's elected. He's come out of the MAGA closet.
Well, see, in some of that, I don't even know it's all MAGA closet. Like he had this one section on Apple where he basically torpedoed Apple too. He literally just called them like basically stagnant, uninnovative. He was like, yeah, for the past 20 years, Apple really hasn't done anything innovative. They always
But that's true. We've talked about that on the
Yeah, we've
podcast.
talked about. Yeah,
Like
I
the
mean,
garbage that's
it's
coming
just he
out, I
hasn't
think it's
stated
just
anything.
I think that's just him talking about it.
Right, but for him to actually call it out, though, I feel like that's a big deal, right? Because
Yeah.
he's not like
Well, I mean,
Elon.
Joe Rogan's podcast is always, that's why Joe Rogan's podcast is so
Yeah,
popular, is
yeah,
because it is the unfiltered side
yeah,
of
yeah,
his
yeah.
guests. So
But anyways, so it was. If you haven't seen it, I guess I'll
yeah.
send more traffic to Joe Rogan because I don't know, whatever.
I can't listen to long form podcasts, but I'll watch the highlights.
Yeah, I just watched the highlights. I don't. 3 hours is way too much.
Yeah. But okay, so back to Zuck. Like,
Yeah.
I think it'll be an interesting year. It'll be interesting next 4 years on how meta evolves and how I think it's also really positive for Elon because now, X social platform, Meta social platform. Are there any synergies that are gonna start to come about in the next couple of years here? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think Zuck and Elon are going to partner or anything because
We shall
they
see.
haven't. Elon, I mean, Elon has called out Zuck quite a bit. Like there's animosity there. I feel like, but
We
I
shall
mean,
see.
I guess we'll see. But historically, they haven't. Elon has always called out Zuck, and so I don't know if. Well, the kid, remember it's like where Musk challenged Zuck to a fight, and Zuck was like, "Bring it on, bro. I'm gonna whoop your ass." Anyways,
I'm thinking about this from a business perspective, not a personal perspective.
well, Elon's a very personal person, so that
Yeah.
affects how he does business. So we'll see.
All right. Well, I think we've talked at length about this topic. We're very passionate about it. You can tell. It's just like it's like popcorn, right? Like
Yes. This is like
so
popcorn.
fascinating to watch and surprising in some senses, and kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, let's close it out with talking about the LA fires.
Yeah.
I know we both have different opinions, or we don't have different opinions. We just have opinions on it. And I think it's definitely devastating. The fire just spread so fast, and millions of, I think like over a million people were without power, or are without power. Hit LA, which is one of the most known popular cities in the world.
I mean, it's one of the biggest. It's like the top 3 biggest cities in the U.S. So
the hub for Hollywood, and that was a lot of what was making the waves, is how all of these celebrities, right, with their multi-million-dollar mansions, kind of got their homes burnt to the ground. So yeah, our thoughts go out to everyone that's dealing with it there. I mean, I had a power outage here for 3 days and it was horrible. Couldn't imagine losing my whole entire house.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, talking recently about this, I saw this YouTube video on a 1-year update for the Lahaina fires. And so some guy flew this drone over Lahaina.
Yeah.
1 year later, like he said, they just finished clearing out the last of the ash and debris.
Yeah.
And the whole city is still flattened.
Yeah.
He said that of the like 3,000 something houses that burned to the ground, only like 100 and something have had their permits approved.
Wow.
And while it's starting to pick up, like not very many homes have been built yet.
Yeah. That's
a year later.
That's ridiculous.
I think LA is probably going to go a bit faster just because they have more resources, more money, and they're, in the mainland US. But yeah, it's just depressing here.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say is like, don't believe everything you read on X. It's starting to get a little outrageous.
Yeah.
A lot of people who like aren't from California or have never lived in California, I don't think they understand like how easy it is for these fires to spread, right? Especially because I guess the Santa Anas are really strong right now. And so people just don't realize how quickly a fire can spread when winds are blowing at 50, 100 miles per hour. Like those embers can go very far, very quickly.
I heard like 2 miles. Like we can go as far as 2 miles.
Yeah, and so that's why the fire spreads. Of course, right, there's blame all around, but I don't think it's any one like there's only so, even if they did everything perfectly, there's only so much they could have done with
Yeah.
the way they started. And also, it doesn't help that some of these fires were started. I'm not saying some, like I think a couple were actually started by a person, like arsonists, were intentionally starting additional fires. Um, so yeah, I guess don't believe everything you read. Take everything with a grain of salt.
What's an example of something that you saw that was like not true?
Well, like there's like all these conspiracies about, I wouldn't say conspiracies, like why wasn't the reservoir full for a year when they knew they were going into fire season? Or that they cut back. I think there was one where Newsom like cut back $100 million from their fire fund or whatever, when in actuality they've increased the fire fund by like $1 billion over the previous year. And so it's things like that. People are like twisting things around to make it. I guess they're just trying to throw all the blame on Democrats
Hmm.
or Newsom, which like some of it is probably partially there, but some of it is just like bad timing or it's bad circumstances kind of like coalesced together
Yeah.
that probably made this go out of control, more out of control than it needed to, or like no water in the hydrants. But again, it was only related to that one reservoir. It's not like no water pressure throughout the entire city is not accurate, right? And you could see in this is the news, people were still trying to spray down their with houses. Also, it's just all sorts of things going on, which is the problem in a free speech community is anything goes, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, the fire hydrant thing though, that was on like NBC News.
yeah.
So I think it did impact like firefighters were saying that it did impact them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not saying
So
it wasn't I'm not saying it was fake news. I'm just saying it's like the way some people describe it as it was the only issue, which it wasn't.
yeah, I think at the heart of it, what you're saying is like don't believe what you hear on X or TikTok.
Or anything. Apparently, it's just it's
Yeah,
like I don't
because
know
like
what I
I
don't know what's
saw this
going
thing
on with the world.
I saw this thing on TikTok that showed up in my feed,
Mhm.
which was the Hollywood sign burning.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I was like, is it really burning? And I had to go look at several
I
different
think I was like,
places. Like,
it's
no, it's
AI.
not.
Like people are just spreading these AI generated
Yeah.
images. And it's like,
See,
oh my
this is
gosh.
the thing. Well, TikTok has until January 19th, since you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That's another thing that's happening. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. I don't know.
So yeah, I think like for the fires,
It's tragic overall,
yeah,
is what I'll say.
and I think for me the thing that I don't like is there's a lot of like spotlight on these celebrity homes being burnt.
Yeah, this is totally like why.
Less and so that dampens kind of the message because for every one celebrity that lost their $20 million mansion,
Hmm.
there's hundreds of like non-celebrities, right? People
Yeah,
who lost their homes that aren't
yeah,
really getting covered
yeah,
because Paris Hilton, John Legend, and Chrissy T, like they're taking the spotlight in terms of
yeah,
their homes got
yeah,
demolished.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. I agree. Like there's a lot of people there who've lived there for like 60 years, right? And so their homes, yes, are expensive, but it's because they've lived there for so long, right? And so it's not because they're like some billionaire or $100 million net worth type person, right? They've just lived in their home for a long time. So yeah, that's I think that's the real tragic part of these fires.
and I was thinking to myself the other day, man, yeah, like losing your home in this type of disaster like this is really tough because if that was happened to me, where would I go, right?
Right.
Like I don't, I mean, I have friends here, obviously, but I'm not going to stay with them for a year.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about the celebrities, like they're in this situation, like where would John Legend and Chrissy Teigen go in this situation? I'm like, oh, they'd probably just go to their other home in Napa Valley
Yeah. Right.
and like spend like the year in their villa.
Yeah. So it's like it's just like different
Yeah.
worlds.
But you think about like the home and these celebrities who lost their like $20 million mansion or even $10 million house, the total value of that is probably much higher because everything inside the home
Yeah.
was probably really expensive as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'm sure they'll come up with estimates of the damage. I've already seen it's like north of like
Billions.
500 billion,
Yeah.
like more billions now. But I think that's an
Yeah.
entirely separate discussion now.
Is there an end in sight for these fires?
It doesn't seem like it. I mean, I guess I was looking at it this morning. It's like some of it is under control. They're hoping to get the largest one in the Palisades under control, but they're afraid the winds will pick back up, which will push it east, which is, if it continue to go east, that would just be the worst, because then you start to get into
Joshua
some of
Tree.
some of the actual like very populated areas versus the Palisades. I mean, it's kind of like in the hills, etc. But once you get far past outside of the hills, I think that's the concern: is does it spread beyond the Palisades?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it closes soon, but we know, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Next couple of years for LA and those neighborhoods. So
Yeah.
That was
all right. All right. Well, that does it for at 44. We're back for 2025.
2025.
Yeah. New year, new life. New year, better new year of progress. I don't know. We'll see.
All right. I'll see you next week.
Okay.